Now I've got another example here. I brought this up in the past as well. Let's say we have given marijuana use clearly leads to heroin addiction. After all, every heroin addict started with marijuana. So I'm going to invite anyone who would like to just jump in and type in the chat or unmute yourself and just share with me what's the evidence in this statement. We'll break it down bit by bit, piece by piece.
Is it that every heroin addict started with marijuana?
Perfect. Awesome. So evidence indicated by after all, every heroin addict started with marijuana. We only have an evidence indicator here. We do not have a conclusion indicator. Sometimes you have one or the other or neither. In this case, we're lucky to have at least one, which tells us that the other part must therefore be the conclusion. So we have here a flawed conclusion. I'm telling you it's flawed. And after all, this is a slide titled Logical Reasoning Flaws. So it's there. I'm giving you that one. What's the flawed conclusion here?
That marijuana use leads to heroin addiction because every heroin addict started with marijuana, but isn't it wrong to say the word every in every statement? Because isn't it hard to find evidence that would fit with, extreme language?
Yeah, it would be hard. I mean, that's an extreme claim here, but it's evidence, so we're to take it as given. Now, if they're making a claim about every heroin addict, that's a strong claim and is pretty unlikely. Have we comprehensively cataloged every heroin addict throughout history, throughout time? There's probably, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands over millennia. Who knows? That's a lot of people. Have we documented all of them? Do we know that we've documented all of them? There's the unknowns, right? So it's hard to say, but that is their claim in the evidence with the word every. So we are to take that as given. What we're looking to evaluate here is the conclusion specifically. So let's diagram this. So I left here some blanks and we can fill in what's the evidence, what's the flawed conclusion, and then we'll take a moment to figure out the valid conclusion. And so yeah, Jasmine, exactly. The first sentence, marijuana use clearly leads to heroin addiction, is the conclusion in this argument. So I'll diagram here in the chat. Evidence is every heroin addict started with marijuana. So if you are a heroin addict, we know that you had marijuana first or prior. So H requires M is the evidence. And then conclusion, how would you diagram that conditionally? Feel free to just type in the chat or call out. Perfect. We got here from Colin, M requires H. Excellent. So marijuana use clearly leads to heroin addiction. So this is the reversal I was talking about previously, where it's the reversal. It's also known as the converse in logic land. So we're reversing the variables around the arrow without negating. That's an improper or incorrect translation. And it's a failed contrapositive attempt, as I would call it. Now, a valid conclusion would be to simply restate the evidence, which is somewhat circular, but it's inferable, or we could do the contrapositive. What would the contrapositive of the evidence be? Well, the contrapositive is reversing the variables around the arrow and negating both of them. So both reversing and negating is the correct translation. And Jasmine's got it here in the chat, not M requires not H. So if you didn't have marijuana, then you must not have had heroin, because heroin requires marijuana. That would be a valid translation, and that's based on the given information, so we're to take that as true as well. So the contrapositive is a valid or correct inference, and for a must be true question, that contrapositive could be the correct answer. Now, in a general must be true question, there could be lots of other things going on as well. This is fairly simple, and for a flaw question, they're not looking for contrapositives, but I'm simply using this one stimulus or argument to do a variety of things with it, to analyze it in a variety of ways. And that's something I really like to emphasize if you're looking to get a higher score, is to take the same stimulus and analyze it from multiple perspectives. Really valuable to be able to do that. And I could easily see on the LSAT, one person could write the stimulus, and then somebody else could give it the question stem and the choices. Once you have an argument, a lot of ways you can analyze it. You could strengthen, you could weaken, you could point out flaws, you could create a parallel argument, lots of directions you can take it in. So this discussion of flaws doesn't just apply to flaw questions. It could apply to a variety of question types as well, in particular, weakened questions as well, as we discussed last night. There are ways to attack an argument further if it does have a flaw, by exposing that gap, by making that gap more problematic. So here is my diagramming of this particular argument. You see, we've got the flawed conclusion that they drew, reversing the variables around the arrow. You've also got the inverse, which would be negating both variables without reversing. And then you've got the contrapositive, or the conclusion, which is simply reversing and negating, which is valid, unlike the previous two that are flawed. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.